Tonight, we expect and hope that we will be joined by 3 experts representing 3 different organizations dealing with electing people that are honest, ethical, and competent. We have Dr. Morgan Lyon Cotti from the Hinkley Institute of Politics, Utah Women Run. We have Melanie Wheat, Utah chapter co-lead of Mormon Women for Ethical Governments. And we have Dr. Carol Osborn from the Utah Women in Politics. Let me introduce them all. Morgan Lyon Cotti is the Associate Director of the Hinkley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah. She is a board member of the Utah Women Run initiative hosted by the Hinkley Institute. She also manages the local and legislative internships. She contributes to Hinkley's political analysis and research, polling, and recently published The Oracle of Utah Politics, A Political History of Utah. Dr. Lyon Cotti has degrees from both BYU and the University of Utah, which is very nice to be so egalitarian, and received a PhD in political science from George Washington University. She is an adjunct assistant professor in the political science department at the University of Utah, where she teaches courses in public affairs and political science. Thank you for being with us. Melanie Wheat, immediately to my left, is currently serving as the Utah chapter co-coordinator for Mormon Women for Ethical Government, where she oversees MWAG's efforts to empower women in Utah to become ambassadors of peace who transcend partisanship and courageously advocate for ethical government. She graduated from BYU with a BA in sociocultural anthropology and also serves on the steering committee for MWAG's Utah Rooting Out Racism project. Beyond her work with MWAG, Melanie is actively engaged in her community, volunteering on PTA boards at her local elementary and middle schools and serving on her city's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Finally, on the far left, Dr. Carol Osborn is a family practice physician. She graduated from Brown University and the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. She has been an associate professor of clinical medicine at the U of Utah, but today works in private practice focusing on comprehensive preventative care in Salt Lake City. She is affiliated with numerous hospitals, including Primary Children's Hospital, University of Utah, and Intermountain Health LDS Hospital. Carol is on the executive board of Utah Women in Politics. We hope to hear from each of them in turn, and then at the conclusion of their panel presentations, I may have some questions or they may have some questions for one another, and then we will turn to the audience to allow your questions to be presented, probably through some of the microphones in the front. Let's start with Dr. Lyon Cotti.
Thank you. I used to say I accidentally went to BYU, but then people who graduated from BYU took a little bit of offense to that, but it's okay. We can all be friends. I forget sometimes when I have that in my bio, I have to be careful as an employee of the University of Utah. Sometimes I like to keep that under wraps. So as you could hear from the 2 places, or the place that I work, the Hinkley Institute of Politics, which now hosts Utah Women Run, I usually am wearing a couple of different hats. But I think both of them still lead to the purpose of this discussion. But I think I'm the most general, I'm the generalist, medical term, not a medical doctor, but I'm a generalist when it comes to politics. And in that, in providing trainings and education and other resources, we're hoping that the end result is that we're not just electing, but we're also encouraging people to vote so that we do get these honest, ethical, and competent people. So the Hinkley Institute was founded, next year will be our 60th birthday. And our founder had this idea that he wanted every student to be a politician. And that has created a mission that is twofold. And one, we're trying to engage students in internships and these transformative experiences locally in DC, abroad, but we're also very engaged with the community, and we host forums. We actually some of our students were working with some league members yesterday, registering voters on a very, very rainy and stormy day at the University of Utah. And we were very grateful that everyone braved the weather, because I think they registered quite a few new voters on campus. So we do these things to engage students, to engage the public. And we're thrilled that Real Women Run is now part of that. So Utah, what was Real Women Run now is Utah Women Run. Real Women Run was founded about 12 years ago because there were some legislators and some local officials, all women, who were looking around saying, what's going on here? Why do we have so few women in government? And they were looking at the national trends and living those national trends too, that in 2018, we all talked about the year of the woman, but I think there are many in this room who remember the original year of the woman in the 90s, when we saw an increase of women in the US Senate and Congress and state legislatures. And Utah was on that upward trajectory, electing more women right at that national average or right below it. And with starting in basically the mid 2000s, we see a divergence in that trend, and Utah plateaued out. And then we started actually seeing a decline in the percentage of women who are in state legislatures, in our state legislature and in other positions. And so these women, being go-getters that they were, said, we've got to do something about this. And they founded Real Women Run. And it originally was at the YWCA. And the focus really was, how do we provide the tools that people need to feel qualified to run, to be qualified to serve in government? Because another data point that these women lived is that women feel like they need to be overqualified to run for office. And that's just not anecdotal people saying that. That is data that is proven over time and time again. The book that was referenced that I wrote, it was actually basically a political history through the eyes of Dan Jones, the pollster that died several years ago. And Dan used to say, a neighbor taps a man on the shoulder and tells him to run for office, and he hears the tabernacle choir in his ear. He feels like it's this call from on high. But the data shows women feel like they need to be tapped over and over again, and they have to feel like they know exactly what they're doing. So these great women who founded Real Women Run said, let's provide some of those tools. So in the early years, the focuses really were on trainings, coming to these big events and teaching women, this is how you create a strategy. This is how you fundraise. This is, the strategy to get delegate votes. This is the strategy to get to a primary. This is how you canvass. This is how you do all of these things. And since then, we've really expanded what we do. And all of that is with that goal of providing those resources, trying to make sure that these wonderful people who are usually already pretty involved in their communities want to run for city council, want to run for school board, legislature, and even higher offices. Because there is a slippery slope from being a member of the PTA to being PTA president to running for school board. And that is a slippery slope that I think we all should be on board with. So, and one of the other wonderful things about this is that the founders of Utah Women Run, were not alone. In the very shortly after we saw the founding of Women's Leadership Institute, we've seen Mormon Women for Ethical Government. We've seen PACs come up, Project Elect, and it feels like we're all just working to, lift that rising tide, lift all boats. We're hoping that all of the boats are being lifted. So now that it's at Hinkley, we had a little bit of a shift to campaign, elect, lead. And that is our motto that we hope signifies the different things that we do. Because yes, we want women to be candidates and running for political office, but also recognize a campaign can be candidate focused or it can be issue focused. And we've seen women at the heart of some of our ballot initiatives, at some of both at the local and state level. And we've seen women really involved in advocacy campaigns. Some of some major pieces of legislation that have passed over the last few years have been driven by women in the community that have gone together and formed nonprofits or formed groups to try to push through this legislation. So when we look at the fact that there are period products in schools, in county buildings at the University of Utah, driven by women. When we look at, greater funding for teen centers, when we look at some of these different things, driven by women. So we're trying to give those tools as well, so that women who see an issue in their community know how to push that through to get those tools. So this year, we're really excited about our programming, and we have really broadened it to try to get to those different areas people are interested in and are wanting some of those tools. So we're working with the Women's Leadership Institute on their political development series. We have an event in St. George that we have done that we're also partnering with the Women's Leadership Institute called The Urgency of Women's Leadership. And this was an interesting lesson that we learned, that we went into some communities really hard with these trainings on hard skills and realized women wanted to lead in different ways, and we needed to provide, instead of maybe some of those hard skills, women were looking for some of those soft skills. And so that's been a really fun and wonderful way to engage with the women of St. George in Southern Utah. We're doing a day on the Hill for the first time this year to try to capture some of those women who really want to understand the legislative process. And maybe they want to push a bill, but maybe they just want to better understand, how do I actually talk to my legislator? What is the strategy behind that? At what time of year am I looking? How do I make it so they know I'm a constituent and not someone on a phone tree from Nebraska, because legislators deal with that. So that is in October during interim day. And we actually just posted that and started marketing it. And we already have 30 people registered. So we're excited about that. And definitely there's that need. We have the Martha Hughes Cannon Awards. We started last year to honor some of the women that are doing wonderful work. And we're still doing our normal trainings. And then this year, we also started a mentorship program, connecting women who maybe they've started dipping that toe, maybe they attended a training, but they really are wanting to sit down and having these in-depth conversations, but they don't necessarily know someone who ran for office, or they don't know their city council person. So we're trying to cast what is a wider net to provide these tools, to provide these resources, to have more engagement. Because while we don't necessarily recruit or endorse, again, the data speaks that when you have a woman on a board or in a meeting, things improve. When you have 2 women, when you have 3 women, then it's astronomical on how it improves and how those voices are heard, especially in government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to turn to Dr. Osborn now, and you might scoot a little closer to us and push the button so your light turns green.
Oh,
Yes.
it's green. Exciting.
And let you present on your organization.
Okay. I'm on the executive board at Utah Women in Politics, and many of you probably have heard of Utah Women in Politics, but I'll tell you a little bit about the origin. Many of us woke up on November 9th, 2017, kind of horrified with what had occurred in this country. And as a result, there was a lot of chatter between groups of friends. And we decided it was time to go to attend the Women's March in Washington, D.C. So we found a bus, and we decided to stage out of Philly because it was a little bit easier than D.C. So we filled a bus up within the first hour of announcing it. And so we got a second bus. And the second bus also out of Philly. And we woke up at 5 a.m. and all got on these buses, 108 people from Utah. And we went down I-95 and with thousands of other buses. It was incredible. I don't know how many of you all attended, but it was quite an event. We had some problems on the way down. One of the buses had a non-functional bathroom. So, but it was amazing how they stopped, this one bus stopped at a rest stop and they all developed, and there were, I mean, it was just crazy because every bathroom was filled. So they developed, our bus set up an outdoor toilet on the bus and, just kind of organized it. And it was from that experience. And then the day we spent in DC was pretty remarkable. I don't know how many of you attended, but it was very peaceful. And there were there was no incidents where people were arrested for hostility or guns or anything like that. And we all came back very excited, but still didn't really know how we wanted to take our energies forward in this environment. So we decided over time that the group of women that did this, one thing we had some income that we could bring together in order to support candidates and maybe make a difference in electing some of the people. And we decided not to focus on the federal levels of candidates, but to focus on the Utah legislature, because we felt in order to break the supermajority and deal with things like gerrymandering and other issues of governance, that we had to do it on a level that we could afford and that we could make a difference. And so that's kind of the origin of Utah Women in Politics. We've now raised over $600,000 since we started in 2017. And we've supported multiple candidates. And the idea is to find candidates that have moderate to progressive political ideas, that want to come either to the center or lead on certain issues, environmental issues, affordable housing issues, community-related issues. And so what we do is every year we put out an application on our website and say, if you're interested in applying and obtaining funding from us, fill out your application. And then we go through a vetting process where we bring the candidates in and do like a half-hour presentation with them or half an hour interaction with them and allow them to present their thoughts and their experience and their personalities to us. And we kind of from that use it as a template to decide whether we're going to fund them. We also want to only fund, we really want to only fund winnable races potentially. So, I mean, we love all of our candidates that seem to come in, but when someone has a 20-point difference between, in the election, in the last election, when it was like, 60-40, say Republican, Democrat, it's very unlikely that candidate will be able to switch that particular district. We try to find where there's been like a 4 to 8% difference. And really then focus on that. And not only do we provide them money, and we can provide them $15,000 or $20,000, which for these races is a really significant amount of money. But we also get our membership to do voter registration. We canvass with the candidates. We do phone calls. We often have postcard writing sessions where we bring the whole group together and write postcards. So there's some grassroots sort of stuff, but our real focus is on raising and distributing money to, we think, who are qualified candidates can help us move the needle in this state, which is so desperately needed. And again, it's so exciting to do vetting of these candidates because they're young, diverse, educated, the kind of people that everybody wants to see in our legislature. Over the years, I just give you some of our stats. In 2018, the first year we really funded candidates, we funded 11 candidates and 6 of them won. And just by history, about 2010, a huge shift in the legislature from, a lopsided legislature to just a purely supermajority Republican legislator. So we're kind of trying to claw back that loss from 2010. And so it doesn't sound like these numbers are that big, but every year we make a gain. And every election we make a gain. And hopefully the idea is by 2030 that we're going to break the supermajority. And that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do. But in 2018, we supported 6 or 11 races, and there were both Republicans and Democrats we supported. The majority were Democrats, but 6 of our candidates won. In 2020. We supported 20 candidates and 4 were elected. And in 2022, we had 15 candidates and 7 won. And these are not, these are races where we're making a gain. We're not just, treading water. And the goal again is to stop the supermajority and to be able to get to a more moderate place in our politics, where we are concerned about government transparency and where everybody's heard. I don't know if anybody was at this rally that Chris Stewart had in 2017. Remember when all the congressmen were coming out at West High School, and he came out and basically it was a rowdy crowd. It was Salt Lake. And basically he looked at us and said, "You don't matter to me because you're not you'll never vote for me. And I have, I'm kind of settled on my constituency." And it was such an outrageous statement. And it's so anti-democratic that's really what kind of propels us to get to a place, not that everybody believes the same thing, but that we all really focus on the things that are important: our environment, affordable housing, freedom for all groups of people, whether they're, racial freedom or gender freedom, whatever it is. And those are the sorts of ideals that we try to focus on and choose candidates from. I do have our endorsed list this year. And usually we do only endorse legislative races, but this year we've branched out and there's a few council races we're supporting, and we're supporting a candidate for the Salt Lake Treasury. And oh, hey, Shyla, right? Yeah. And anyway, so I know this, you're nonpartisan or whatever, but I did bring the list of endorsed candidates. So anybody who wants to see that, I have a copy of them. My colored printer was missing a color, so it's a little bit smudgy. But I'll be able to hand those out, or you can pick a copy up whenever you want. We don't support only women; we support men and women. We are more focused on their abilities as a candidate, their beliefs, and whether they're in a district that we think we can really make a difference in. So thank you.
Thank you. And now we want to turn to Melanie Wheat, who's from the Mormon Women for Ethical Government and isn't recruiting anybody to run, but is watching very carefully those people that are elected to make sure they remain ethical. I think we'll turn it over to Melanie.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? We haven't heard that recently, right? Thank you. It's great to be here with all these other great organizations, and we're grateful that the League invited us to come out today. We've done a lot of work recently with the League, and so we're grateful for the work that you guys do here in Utah and your long-standing work that you've been doing here in Utah for a long time. So like she said, my name is Melanie Wheat. I'm one of our co-coordinators for our Utah chapter. And I just wanted to start by introducing MWEG a little bit to you. So Mormon Women for Ethical Government, short for MWEG. You don't have to use the whole name. We are women of faith building a more peaceful, just, and ethical world. And we do that through these 4 guiding principles that we have: faithful, nonpartisan, proactive, and peaceful. We are a national organization. We have women from all across the United States. We have about 7,000 members in 13 chapters. And because obviously Utah has a lot of Mormon women, our Utah chapter is our biggest chapter. So we have about 2,000 women here in our Utah chapter. And then what do? We have a dual mission at MWEG. On the one hand, we advocate for ethical policies. And we also, on the other hand, empower our women to become, with the tools they need to become effective, engaged citizens. And in Utah, that does a lot. We do a lot of educating on the political process of the state legislature. Who do you need to talk to if you have like an issue at your school, how to get to your state school board or your local school board. And then at the national level, let's see. Okay, so at the national level, these are our policy, our advocacy areas. We advocate for protecting democracy, caring for creation, immigration reform, rooting out racism, and supporting children and families. And those, we know ethical government, you hear ethical government and you're like, what is that? Well, it's huge, right? Because anything that has to do with the government, you want it to be ethical. So we've narrowed down these areas because we can't do everything. And protecting democracy is there at the top because it bleeds into so many of these other issues. You can't advocate for stewardship over the earth if you can't elect people who care about that. So you can't, if you don't have fair districts, for example, you won't be able to elect someone who cares about the policies that you care about. So protecting democracy is a big one, and then it's been a big one here in Utah especially. But these are some of the areas that we do advocate for as well. And then at the national level, we have our empower. How do we empower our women at the national level? We have our Principled Citizen Initiative. We have media literacy campaign, because we know that without good information, we can't make good decisions. We can't vote for good people if we don't know, if we don't have the tools to find out what their positions are, and find out what policies we would support, you would want to support anyways. And then we talk a lot about peace and peacemaking, and I'll talk a bit about that as well in a few minutes. And then we also have our MWEG leadership development, where internally we're developing women who come to us who may not have these skills, and we're going to put them to work however they want to help us out. So we have a lot of volunteers, and we have a lot of part-time employees, and we have I think we just have 2 full-time employees, but we have a lot of women from all walks of life who come to us, and we help build them into leaders. So I'm an example of that. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. I came to MWEG, started volunteering, got brought on as a leader in the Utah chapter. And when I first came to MWEG, I had never called my congressman. I didn't know how to do that. It was scary, like talking to some stranger on the phone that I've never met. And so we try to help women to see that this is not a scary thing. And politics isn't something that needs to be divisive necessarily. It's something that if you want to advocate for the people in your community, if you want to advocate for refugees, if you want to advocate for children, this is how you do it. So going on to peacemaking, like I said before, we talk a lot about peacemaking in MWEG, and maybe the best way to do it, talk about what is peacemaking is talk about what it is not. So it is not peacekeeping. When you think of peacemaking, you might think like, oh, keeping the peace, right? Like being quiet and avoiding conflict at all costs there on the slide. But no, that's not what peacemaking is. Peacemaking acknowledges that there is conflict, and we want to maybe even go towards that conflict, but we're going to recognize and honor the values of both sides, and we're going to engage with curiosity on both sides. And it is an active participation. So peacemaking is not peacekeeping. And then we want to distinguish between negative peace and positive peace. So a negative peace, maybe there's not violence, but there's still maybe that threat of violence. And it's achieved through coercion or force, and it's stagnant. A positive peace is a reduction of violence and fear. And so looking through politics in the past few years in Utah, I think we've seen that there has been negative peace and where we want to move up to is positive peace, where everyone is having their opinions heard and everyone is working for issues that will benefit everyone and not just being steamrolled, maybe. So when we're looking to vote for candidates, peacemaking, I think is a good thing to look at in a candidate. Are they a peacemaker? Are they someone who is going to engage with all of their constituents and not just the constituents on one side or the extremes of one side? Even if they're not going to vote in a way that, like, you're not going to make everyone happy, even if they're not going to vote in a way that you want them to, have they acknowledged you? Have they listened to you? So are they willing to look at multiple perspectives and hear from multiple candidates or multiple citizens from all walks of life? Okay, so on to our principal voter initiative. We are just rolling that out right now. MWEG has a principal voter initiative that we want our members to look at candidates and to look at themselves and become a principal voter. So are you, as a voter, are you voting with just your interest in mind? Or are you looking to see if your vote would also support other people in your community? Will your vote harm others and leave them behind, or are you going to bring everyone along? And then principal leaders, they have an even bigger responsibility because they're leaders and they are expected to represent everyone. They have an ethical obligation to represent everyone. So are they acting in just their own self-interest or in the self-interest of their party, or are they working for the common good? So these guys came at it more from, because their organizations are more getting women to run for office and helping good women run for office. I'm coming more from a voter perspective. So tips for you as a voter, how can you research your candidates? So some tips are to go to voter websites and toolkits. So vote.utah.gov is our state government website. And it's great. You can go on there. They're not there yet. I've just looked yesterday, but all the candidates will have their profiles on there, and that's just a great starting point. They'll have a little blurb on who they are, and that's a great starting point. If you don't have a lot of time, that's something you can just start there. You can also go, I know the League of Women Voters works with vote411.org, and they have voting candidate guides or voter guides. And those are coming soon. And also Ballotpedia also has a voter guide. I think that was just released this week with information about candidates and who's on your ballot. And then you can look at endorsements. So just like we saw here, you can look at endorsements, candidate endorsements from groups that you align with. And you can also go straight to the candidate websites. And when you're looking at the websites, pay particular attention to their issues. What are the policies that they are advocating for? And do those policies align with what policies are important to you? And you can also look for outside sources of the candidate. Have they done op-eds? Have they done interviews with like radio or TV? So you can get an idea of who they are there, or with other organizations if they've done. So some questions to think about when you are vetting your candidates. Does this candidate try to understand the complexities of an issue? So that's like what I was talking about before with our peacemaking. We know that I wouldn't even say both sides. There are multiple sides to an issue. And does that candidate acknowledge that? Does the candidate's top issue align with the top issue of your community? And do they prioritize the most pressing issues? I think a lot of times, sometimes you'll hear candidates talk about issues and you're like, that's not even something that I'm concerned about. I'm not even, like, my neighbors are not concerned about. I don't know where this issue is coming up, and maybe it's trickling in from the national level or something. But are they paying attention to the issues that are important to your community? And then pay attention to how do they run their campaign? Are they using negative negative speech? Are they attacking their political opponents? And are they reflecting a character that represents you and represents the community that you live in? And then looking at financials, who are the major contributors to this candidate and what kind of power do they hold over the candidate? And are you comfortable with that? Because we know it takes money to run a campaign. So everyone is going to have someone that's backing them. But are you comfortable with the people who are backing them? And if you pull up their financials, you can go ahead and ask them straight out. Have you made any promises to these people for getting money? Because we know candidates need money, so they're going to have money from different places. Are you comfortable with the money that they've been receiving? So what you can do after you've done all this, right? Because we know you're going to go out and you're going to do your research, but maybe your neighbors doesn't know all this and doesn't know where to start. You can host a voter preparation party. This is something that we've done with our members, and I've done it in my neighborhood multiple times. And it's kind of fun because sometimes you don't talk politics with your neighbors because, you know, politics, it's messy and you don't want to bring that up. But if you're inviting them to your house to talk politics, they know they're coming into it knowing that you're going to talk politics. And in my experience, it's been a good experience. It hasn't been messy or contentious. And I think that's because we're kind of laying the groundwork from the beginning that we're going to be talking about many different issues and many different candidates, and laying the groundwork at the beginning that we want to keep an open mind with everything. So what we do, we just go down the ballot and we talk about everyone who's on the ballot and what have you heard about this person? And as me, when I host them, I try to stay more neutral because I'm the host, but I encourage everyone who's coming to go ahead and just give their opinions. And sometimes you might assign someone to like represent a candidate or an issue so that we have multiple people talking about multiple things. So voter preparation party, you can do it online or you can do it in person. MWEG has some sheets, and we actually, if you want to scan that, or I can share the website, we have materials that you can just print off and you can fill them out as you go. But I think it's important to help our neighbors and to help our friends as well, who may not be, maybe if you're here, you're more into politics, but maybe your neighbors are not as experienced and don't know these things. And if we can help as many people as we can, and not even pushing them to one side or another in this voter preparation party, but just to come and talk to each other. I think it does good to get people to come and talk to each other. And just for so I hear this from like the legislature sometimes, is that voters are not informed, and so we are making the decisions, and kind of this like, oh, you little voter, but we've heard it all. We know what the true the right answer is. If we can help our neighbors to also be informed, and that would go a long way as well with trying to get whatever causes that we're trying to advocate, is to make sure that everyone is informed as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all three of you. I'm going to hit it off with some questions that I would invite you all to respond to. I believe Dr. Lyon Cotti and Dr. Osborn both talked about statistics, that having women on board is better, or having diversity is better for decision-making. Can you give us, not everybody is sort of up on the social science. Can you give us a little more background on that?
I guess I am the soft scientist up here. So there's a host of research and data that supports this, that having just one woman improve something, but there is a threshold. And when you get 2 or 3 women in a room, it data decision, risk assessment, all of these different things that are so important improves, and we see better outcomes. This can be found in government, this can be found in business. And I think sort of that the softer side of that we can really see in politics is that the idea of government is that it represents the people, as Mallory was just saying. And certainly, you do require a legislator or an elected official. They have to represent people who they haven't had that lived experience. But if we can have a legislative body, a city council, a governing body that does represent those different life experiences, then that will inform what types of bills are proposed, how they're written, and of course, how they're passed. And again, I think we see this when we talk about education policy. When you have a young parent in the room, it's talked about a little differently. People that are sort of, as it were, in the trenches of that young parenting stage of life. And I referenced this before, but there were really interesting stories that came out of the bill that passed to provide period products in public spaces, that the lack of knowledge that some of the male legislators had was a little bit astounding. Men that were husbands and fathers of daughters and still needed a lot of education. And that education came because women were involved in the policy making process. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, any
You wanna add
comments
anything?
from,
The only thing I would say is that, it's, that obviously having women in the room, and the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. But it's also, there's so many other different issues besides, gender issues. I mean, there's racial issues. So it's important to have representatives from different groups of people and also different economic strata. I think that has a huge impact on perhaps a sensitivity that one will have when looking at legislation and impacts on communities. And if you've always been isolated from the realities of homelessness or housing issues or, debt, whatever, I think that you don't have the sensitivity that you might need in order to pass good legislation. So I think that, yeah, I'm a real advocate for females to be involved politically, but I also think you have to go through a whole another layer of things in order to get the diversity that you need in the legislative process.
diversity in the widest sense?
The widest sense.
It informs all decisions because everyone's got a different perspective and they bring that to make the decision formed. Mallory, you were speaking about researching candidates, looking for candidates who would understand the complexity of the issues and work for the best interest of the community. How does that relate to getting to this idea of being open to diversity?
So I think when you have diversity of thought within your elected officials, like you said, they're coming with their own background, they're coming with their own lived experiences, and that's something that's hard to like replicate is if you've had your own experience. So know when a candidate comes, knowing what their lived experience already is, they don't have to try to research it. They already know it. So that's the great thing about having a diversity in candidates. And then what was the first?
I think
part?
that's it.
Okay. There was something else I was thinking too.
Well, I wanted to explore just a little bit more about your peacemaking and your positive peace being things that you're looking for in a candidate. Candidates that can acknowledge conflict and then explore differences and engage in those differences. and candidates that are looking for a transformational piece instead of just shutting down the other side, really wanting to lift up the other side. That seems to be very important to allow diverse ideas to come forward. If you're not a diverse candidate yourself, if you're not a diverse elected official yourself, or there isn't the diversity on the body, having elected officials that will reach out for diverse opinions appears to be important. Tell us
Yeah,
how
and-
that has developed with you folks.
Elected officials, they're basically negotiators. They have to take all these different opinions from all these different people. You're not going to please everyone all the time. So are they able to talk with their constituents and to get the feedback from their constituents, and go through that in a peaceful manner where everyone is feeling like they were heard, and we're not just like getting one side. I hear a lot from our members that they wrote to their elected official, and their elected official just kind of wrote them off. They never responded, or they responded with something that was just like, they knew it was just out of left field, like it wasn't even addressing their concerns. So looking for candidates who are willing to address those concerns. I feel I'll give a specific example. In the state legislature last year, there was a diversity and inclusion bill that came through, and I've done a lot of work with diversity and inclusion, and we just felt like we were not being heard. Like we were saying these, like talking to legislators, and saying how important it was, especially for like students to feel like they are being seen, and we felt like we were not being seen. So looking for candidates who at least are going to acknowledge what your position is, and acknowledge the positions of their different constituents, because it is hard for a candidate or an elected official to have to narrow down what is the most, like, what do my constituents feel like the most? And maybe they're going to have to make their own decision about that, and just with their ethical background. So I do acknowledge that there are many different ideas out there that they're coming at, but feeling like someone's concerns were addressed, are they taking it back to their colleagues and saying, hey, some of our constituents feel this way. Is there something that we can change? Maybe with this bill, or is there another way that we can do this? So I think that is part of peacemaking. That's part of the negotiations that elected officials do. And are they willing to do that, or are they just going to go along with what the status quo is?
You raise the interesting issue of the character of the candidate, not just the issues the candidate supports. I'm sorry, it wasn't on the mic. You raised the interesting issue of the character of the candidate, not just the issue that the candidate supports. How do you get at knowing what the candidate's character is? Mallory, you've given us a lot of examples of, look at the candidate's interview, look at who's endorsing the candidate. But some people have argued you should vote for the candidate with the best character, irrespective of the issues. Other people have argued you have to vote for the issues, because that's what's going to help you out. I wonder if you could each address Dr. Osborn, when you are vetting people, how do you vet the character of the people? Dr. Lyon Cotti, when you're educating people, how do you educate them into having a proper character? Do you just tell them, well, you can't do these cheating things? Or is there some effort to raise up issues that might actually inform them? And then Mallory, you've already said a lot about how you focus on the character of the candidate, not just the issues. Anything else you'd like to add would be really welcome. Well, push a button.
Yeah, we do a ton of vetting, so I'll address that issue. In terms of, we've had a discussion because we have so many applications, whether we can just do kind of, visual, person to person vetting. And I think that that really, really is a bad way of trying to determine if the candidate meets the goals of your organization, because there's so much that you can learn from just meeting somebody. But we really focus on, are they involved in community? Do they support and have they been involved with issues that we feel are essential to focus on? Do they have a history of public policy? Do they understand how the legislative process works? And do they have the kind of personality that is open to different ideas and thoughts and exchanging them? And I think that when you sit down with somebody and kind of review all these things, plus hear how they articulate themselves, it's really useful to be able to then make a decision on the kind of candidate they're going to be. I can't always be assured that, they're going to be, the perfect legislator that in my eyes, but will they represent everybody, and will they be open to listening to people? I think that that's what we do on in our vetting process. So I think one-to-one, and most people who are voting don't get that opportunity to sit down one-to-one to a candidate, but we do. And that's why I think our endorsements are really crucial and important to understand what are the things that, the candidates we think that represent those qualities.
So I'm just trying to think of how to answer the question, because I don't know if you can train character, but we certainly through Utah Women Run, and also at the Hinkley, we manage the campaign management minor for the University of Utah. And so we do teach some of those really practical things, like, as you said, how not to break the law when you're campaigning, what those financial laws are, what the fundraising regulations and rules are. So we do provide those hard skills of how to do that. But at the end of the day, voters are really busy people, and they're usually looking for those cues. They're looking for shortcuts. And that's not to say voters are lazy. That is to say voters are busy and they need to find the shortcuts. And sometimes that's party, sometimes that is endorsements. But there's also that emotional component of voting. And it's interesting. There's so many interviews and podcasts and material out there about the undecided voters in the presidential election. And a lot of the language I hear is people talking about, well, I didn't get this exact answer. I was looking at the debate, or I don't know how I feel. There's a lot of feelings because they want to feel that connection. And it's usually about the character. We hear about people, sometimes plugging their nose, eating their vegetables and voting a certain way because that's their party connection, or that's their view of the economy, or they have this one major issue they really focus on. Lately, there's been a lot about abortion and how that can dictate, and the Supreme Court, how that can dictate how a person votes. But a lot of times they're looking at that literature, they're looking at that messaging. How is the person putting themselves out there? And sometimes that does, I think, get to the character. What is that image they're trying to project? Is it that they're a family person? Is it that they're honest, that they're hardworking, that they're the everyman, they're blue collar, they're what have you? So sometimes you can use those cues to try to parse through that and figure out, do I identify with that? Does that signify a strong character to me?
So I think it's hard to get to know someone if you're voting that for them at a national level, but for the great thing about our local candidates is you can go to a meet and greet. A lot of them are there and they're willing to talk to you. So policies are really important, but you're not going to be able to talk to them about every policy, and you have no idea what's going to be coming up. Like if you're talking to a state school board member, you don't know everything that could be coming up in the state school board. So I think character is really an important thing to be looking at. So you want to look at someone, is this someone that I can trust to make it a good decision, who is trying to look out for the good of my entire community, even with a policy that you maybe haven't even thought of yet.
Thank you. I think we have some questions online, And I want to invite the audience that has questions to come up and sit at that table and use that mic. What's our question online?
Yes, we just have one question online, and this is for any of the panelists. The topic of the legislators and governor not representing the voice of the residents is quite visible. Are there candidates addressing this? Anyone?
I think you certainly hear certain candidates saying that and saying that's often what you hear from a candidate anyway. I will represent you. I am the change. But I think that is a theme that we are seeing, and we're hearing it from both sides, from both Republicans and Democrats. The Republicans saying, you know, we were elected. These are the laws that we've passed with Amendment D and some of the pushback on that, and with ballot initiatives. It's just really interesting to see that debate, but I'm seeing that from independent candidates, third-party candidates and Democrats right now saying, you know, I will be your voice. I will represent everyone in the district. But I don't think that's anything unique to Utah or even this moment in time in Utah. I think that's something you often see.
I think it gets back to diversity issue. Do you have, you know, it feels like our legislature's pretty monochromatic in many ways. And I don't have to go into details about what that means. But I think, you know, to find, you know, people of color, to find different genders, to find different economic group, people with different economic backgrounds, that to me is going to answer and the questioner's concern. If you have a more diverse group of people, you're going to have probably better governance.
Linda, yeah.
It's green, yay.
Yeah.
Am with the League of Women Voters, and it sounds like most of you, if maybe not Dr. Osborn so much, recommend reading the candidates' replies to surveys and questions on how they will, what their platform is, what their mission is. And I'm finding difficulty in getting some candidates to respond. So does that, what is the takeaway from that? Do we need to read into that? Is it apathetic? Is it just Utah? Is it, I don't respect your organizations to respond? Why would a candidate not answer simple, basic questions that we're asking everybody nonpartisan wise?
Are you talking about like as an organization, you've reached out to a candidate and they haven't responded, or as
I'm
like
gonna,
an
I'm gonna
individual?
say both, a citizen and as a nonpartisan member for the league, because we are asking, we have the vote 411, and we are going out and asking candidates to answer our questions that we've gotten from communities. But also as a citizen, I've seen them around, they are, you know, walking around, and I say, hey, you know, can you give a little comment on this, that, and that? Nah, I don't need to do that for you. Sorry. They haven't quite said, you're not my constituent, but they are not willing to answer me or anyone else. It's not just me. Other people have done that also. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I'm trying to see them being honest and ethical. And if they don't want to respond to any of the questions that we have for them as a community, as a citizen, as a constituent, what is the takeaway on that?
Yeah, I would see that as a red flag. You always want to give someone like the benefit of a doubt. Maybe they're busy, but if you've been reaching out and they still haven't, like they don't see the importance of responding to you, that's probably how they're going to respond when they are an elected person as well. And that's not something that you want in your elected officials. I don't know if one has any else.
I mean, we see these so many different groups across the political spectrum send out these surveys, and some of them even then will rate the candidate or the elected official. And there are so many politicians on both sides of the aisle that take it as such a point of pride to respond to as much as they can. It doesn't matter what direction, if it's someone who agrees with them or who doesn't. Some of them really are just busy or maybe aren't good at that component of the job. But I think there are those that from, you know, the very local to federal who will do that calculation and think, you know, I don't think this will actually get me any votes. And so I'm going to focus my time and my resources elsewhere. And the organization can take that for what it is. Yeah.
I agree with both of what you say, Morgan and Maka, but I guess in my experience, because we have candidates that have to fill out these pretty long applications, and we get pushback on that. And I said, we're going to give you money. We're going to give you a lot of money. You really should fill these out. So, when you talk to political managers, they say they're really busy. Well, they also probably have full-time jobs and children to care for. I mean, I do think that's a problem. I get inundated with surveys on a medical basis, and I just delete. So there's so much noise coming in, is what you're saying too. And I think that that's part of it. But having said that, I also feel like there's sometimes a calculation in terms of, is this a group that's going to support me and I should fill out the application, versus let's blow them off. They're not in my camp. So I think there's many reasons, but those are the two major things I would consider as red flags.
Are there other questions in the audience? You can come right up here to the front. While we're waiting for the next audience question, I want to ask our panelists to think about this. We've been talking about candidates as if they've never been in office yet. But what about the candidate after they've been in office and we notice something that we consider not maybe ethical behavior? Don't answer that one yet, but think about that. And we have our next audience question.
My name is Kristen. Here we go. My name is Kristen. I am a longtime voter, but I'm a new league member. And I confess I've never attended a candidate meet and greet, although I might do so now. But I don't know that I really know what to ask. So I'm curious to know if any of you have any favorite questions that if I only had a couple of minutes with a candidate, what kinds of things can I ask?
My favorite question is, what made you want to run for office? Because depending on what they respond, that's going to be a signal of what's important to them.
That's great. Thank you.
That was actually going to be mine as well. In the presentation I do at the very beginning of our campaign management class, I have a slide that has like a picture of a refinery, a fence, a park bench, and some gnats. And those are all reasons that I know personally why people ran. And those usually they were so community focused that it told a lot about that person and what their motivation was.
Thank you.
Certainly, you always want to know what was their motivation to step up to the plate. But I also am very interested in, like what their involvement in community activities, whether it's they've been on councils, they've been PTA presidents, they've been, have other either faith related or community organization related involvement. Because to me, anybody can step up and say, I want to run for this because I'm really angry or upset about this. But if they have a pattern of going and being involved with community things, I always think that's a really good litmus test for people. Also, I tend to stay away from people who are overly involved with trade organizations and people who are, just really financially motivated. Not that, I mean, we support small business people in our endorsements, but I think that people with larger corporate sort of mentalities tend to be focused on what's better for that business. I mean, not solely, but I think there's a lot of that goes on, especially in our legislature. So I try to steer away from those candidates.
Thank you. Great points. I appreciate it.
And you should go to a meet and greet. It's
will.
great to see them as real people and not just like someone up on the hill. Like this person lives in my neighborhood and they are I'm probably as qualified as they are, but we're going to elect them.
I thought about it because I was tabling with Linda last night and a candidate came up and introduced herself and I knew who she was, but I just blanked out and I didn't know what to ask, and I thought about it a lot since. So thank you.
Thank you. These are great answers. You really ferrets out whether the person is in it for their ego and their fame and control, or whether they're in it to serve the community and therefore might listen to the community. I think those two motivations are there, and we want to find the one that's in it to serve the community. what about my question, especially MWEG, ethical government, we're looking at the government, seeing whether they're behaving ethically. What do we do about somebody that we think is, unethical in what they're doing? Does that inform our votes in the future? Do we take action before the next election? Do we keep a list of bad people don't vote for again?
Well, MWIG is nonpartisan, so we don't keep a list. We don't keep a list of people not to vote for, but yeah, that can get into the weeds, because the way that we check our elected officials really is by voting. But then you have like League of Women Voters and MWEG are suing for fair districts because we don't feel like we are fairly represented in our votes. So there are other things that we could do if you want to get into the weeds of government reform. But that main check is supposed to be voting, but there are other reforms that we could do.
Well, even somebody's response to when they're called out for being unethical or illegal. For instance, there was an event where our governor and our former president were in a photograph in a cemetery where there wasn't supposed to be political campaigning. And I think our former president defended, and our governor said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." And that's a different response. To say I'm always right versus, oops, I made a mistake. But I don't know that anybody's collecting those kind of observations of people that are misbehaving worse than people that are behaving better. Any other questions from the audience? Any more questions online? I'm gonna look to our presenters to give a couple minute wrap up. You've had a chance to listen to one another and hear the questions from the audience and think about these deep thoughts and last takeaways you'd like to leave with us. Let's start in the order we went. Dr. Lyon Cotti.
What we preach with Utah Women Run and with the Hinkley Institute is just engage, vote, be as engaged as little or as much as you can. If that means voting every 4 years, if that means voting every single election on every single bond, or if that means you're ready to jump into that political arena. It's not as daunting, hopefully, as a lot of people think. Like sometimes that very first experience where you're suddenly faced with your elected official and you think, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do? But I often find that as soon as people go to that first interim meeting, they feel like they're a little empowered. They've got a little more knowledge. It's amazing to see suddenly how eager they are to run for city council, to be more engaged and to be making that difference in their communities. And there's so many resources. Just as we've said, all of these groups have sprung up in the last decade. There's so many resources. So please use them.
Thank you, Dr. Osborn.
First, I'll put on the green light. I guess what I feel that we've done and spent our time and energy and now money is to find the absolute best candidates for changing the way legislation and governance has been done in Utah, especially over the last, 30, 40 years. I haven't been around that long. But I do think that what we've done is try to distill that down so everybody can kind of look at this and make a decision based on a number of steps that we've taken. Now, I know that everybody's not on the same political plate, but I think that when you think about how there's questions that people have asked in terms of how do we deal with a government which we feel doesn't really represent us. And I think that that's a large part of what I've heard over the last, last 10 years is how do we get to a point where we feel like, okay, I might not agree with everything they did, but I feel that my thoughts and my perspective was in the room. So that's why I feel like we have to diversify, that we need to elect candidates that come from different backgrounds. And I just was looking at the list of endorsements. I mean, we have a CPA accountant who's a CPA running against a non-CPA for a treasurer position. We have a water scientist from Ogden. We have an elementary education teacher. We have a lawyer, a doctor, community advocate. I mean, all these people bring such interesting perspectives. And that's why I feel it's important to, obviously look at a candidate, and just because they have an R by their name or a D by their name, that doesn't mean that's who you should vote for. But you should look to see kind of their background and what they do and how they can help break the kind of legislative lock that we're in currently. Thanks.
So this is a presidential year, so all the national politics is getting a lot of attention, and we'll probably have a good voter turnout because of that. But our Utah politics and our local politics, those are really important races to be paying attention to. Even the questions that are on the ballot this year, who are not candidates, but like we have Amendment A, maybe Amendment D, maybe not. And we have B and C. Those are important topics for us to be paying attention to. So don't just focus in on the national, even though that's important too, but go meet the candidates for your local level and do some research on them. These are the people who are making your decisions for your everyday lives. So I think that would be my final thought, is that our local elections are really important. And this is a local election year too.
Thank you all. Thank you, speakers, members, guests, for attending in person and online. Everyone who found tonight's event useful, take a few minutes to like or share us on posts in your social media. I'm going to excuse our guests now because we just have a little teeny bit of business in our general meeting. And thank you very much again. Feel free to leave the handouts there.
Yeah, I also have some handouts. How do you choose a principled leader? That has kind of a checklist of some of the questions that I talked about.
Great.
And I forgot handouts, but you can find out more information at utahwomenrun.org. Thank you.
Our next events, our unit meetings. Our night owls meet on the fourth Monday of the month, which will next be Monday, September 23rd at 7:30 p.m. and on Zoom. It's a hybrid meeting. They are now meeting at the Community of Grace Presbyterian Church, 2015 East Newcastle Drive in Sandy. This month's meeting will consider book bans. Contact Betty Van Pelt for further information. Nightingales meet the last Tuesday of the month, which will be Tuesday, September 24th at Judy Short's home. I think I saw Judy Short here. Judy, what's your unit meeting considering? This meeting, okay. Okay, is Marilyn coming to your next meeting, the 24th? Are you coming on the 24th? Excellent. Okay. We're not hearing this online, so I'm going to repeat that. The Nightingales, which will be meeting Tuesday, September 24th at Judy Short's home at 7:30 p.m. will be enjoying a presentation from Marilyn Bown about how to be effective advocates, including writing letters to the editor, op-eds, writing to your legislator, and there'll be an opportunity to do further discussion from this meeting. Yes. Yeah, I was going to get to that. But as long as you pointed out, Haley, we have a new unit at the University of Utah. Haley Keller heads that up. And when's your next meeting and what is its topic? And when is it? Monday, the 23rd of September at 5:45. Haley Keller will be leading the University of Utah meeting, which will build off of what we've been talking here tonight. And last but not least, the town club meets the first Thursday of the month, which will be next October 1st at 11 a.m. in person at the town club. This month, former Chief Justice Christine Durham will be speaking about the independence of the judiciary. Since Justice Durham was also on the redistricting commission, we expect some insights into that as well. The program is followed by an optional lunch with payment and RSVPs in advance required. If you're interested in going to the town club, please contact Kathy Bealey. Our next general meeting will be October 16th, and we will discuss the crisis in childcare. We'll have a panel of 4 experts, including, I think, most well-known Professor Susan Madsen from USU. She's like the person on women in work. Okay. I try to do an update on advocacy items that are going on. We may all know about Amendment D, but maybe we don't. So I'll just bring everybody up to date. On September 25th, that's next Wednesday, at 9:30, the Utah Supreme Court will hear oral argument in the legislature's appeal from the 3rd District Court declaring Amendment D void. As you know, the Utah Supreme Court issued a decision in our gerrymandering case in July, finding that people possess a fundamental right to, quote, alter or reform the government. When we do so through a referendum, the legislature may not undo that reform unless the change is narrowly tailored to advance a compelling governmental interest. The legislature was unhappy with that unanimous Supreme Court decision in July, and therefore called an emergency session and voted to amend the Constitution to provide that the legislature can freely amend or overturn any referendum for any reason or no reason. If this constitutional amendment passes, it will overturn the outcome of the gerrymandering case and basically make referenda a thing of the past. The legislative leaders described the amendment as strengthening the initiative process by clarifying the voters and legislative bodies' abilities to amend law. Our lawyers moved to strike Amendment D from the ballot. The district court held that the description was misleading and votes on Amendment D would be void, holding that, quote, the people of Utah are entitled to an accurate summary of any proposed constitutional amendment that impacts fundamental rights, close quote. We'll see what the Supreme Court hears on September 25th. The legislature is arguing that, quote, a handful of people and special interest groups want to squelch the right of the people to vote on this amendment. As members of this grassroots Utah organization, plaintiffs in this case, I encourage you to watch, to log in, or attend the hearing in public. Thank you. Unless there's any other comments or questions from the audience, we'll call this meeting to a close. Thank you.